Honorable Brenzel Dennis Rule, Minister of the Public Service and National Insurance, Mr. Troy Smith, Chairman, and Mr. Jeffrey Stewart, Deputy Chairman, and the members of the National Insurance Board, the executive management teams of the Ministry of Public Service and National Insurance, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to this press briefing. And now I invite the Honorable Minister, Brenzel Dennis Rule, to present his report. He will be followed by Dr. Nicola Virgil Rule, the Director of National Insurance. Minister.
Permanent Secretary, Chairman and members of the National Insurance Board, Director of National Insurance, the management and the executive teams of the Ministry of the Public Service and National Insurance, ladies and gentlemen of the media, my fellow Bahamians, good afternoon. Our Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, requested that ministers provide this country with an update on matters pertaining to their respective ministries. Today, the Ministry of the Public Service and National Insurance Board will report on our performance and actions throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the Public Service makes up the single largest employee base in this country, with over 20,000 public officers. These offices are the conduit through which the government delivers its services to all of its international stakeholders and to the Bahamian public at large. Let me begin by acknowledging how vital of a role they play in allowing this country to function throughout this pandemic and during the normal days of the year. The public service is the heartbeat of this proud nation, and we owe them all a huge debt of gratitude for their silent sacrifice and their tireless work. As minister, with the responsibility for the public service, I offer my thanks and eternal gratitude to the brave men and women of the public service who continue to work on the front lines of this pandemic and assist with safeguarding the health and well-being of the people of our nation. They voluntarily risk their lives and leave their families behind from the onset to take care of our sick, our elderly, our orphan, and mentally ill. The uniformed branches protect us. The healthcare workers treated us, and other public officers played their roles to ensure that other essential operations are carried on smoothly, especially since March. These officers answer the call of service to God and to country. And because of their humble sacrifice, these public officers are the heroes in this crisis. I convey our sincere and heartfelt appreciation to the healthcare workers and professionals, to the finance professionals, the law enforcement officers, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, social workers, national insurance employees, education and sanitation workers, environmental health staff, and all employees on the front line. Even now, I thank all public officers and civil servants. It is a direct result of your hard work and dedication that we have made it thus far. Consequently, I urge you to continue for your work is not yet done. While we take time to acknowledge all of the hard work and dedication of public officers, I must also take time and take this opportunity to convey my heartfelt condolences to the families of loved ones who died as a result of COVID-19. This goes for public officers and to the Bahamian public at large. Our prayers are with you at this time, and may the souls of your family members rest in peace and rise in glory. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been directly affected, most of us, by a spouse, a co-worker, a friend, or family member who have contracted the disease. COVID-19 is truly no respecter of any person. I wish to offer my prayers to those persons who are currently hospitalized and are in for recovery. To those who have recovered, I thank God for preserving you, and may your story be used to encourage many other citizens. The health and safety of all staff members remain the number one priority of the government of the Bahamas. The safe reopening and functioning of the different agencies of the government needs to serve as a model for the reopening of the rest of the country. We need to, and indeed, we have established a clear, standardized plan of action for all ministries to follow. The plan is clear enough to be applied broadly, but also flexible enough to cater to special emergencies throughout the system. In this regard, the Ministry of the Public Service was mandated to do the following: to establish a health and safety committee within each ministry, to implement a shift system in support of social distancing in ministries and departments, to ensure that employees with compromised health systems were allowed to work remotely on receipt of a medical certificate from a registered physician, to return to work where the return to work policy was prepared by senior managers in the Ministry of the Public Service, and staff members are required to comply with these guidelines, which are basically to ensure the safety and well-being of all persons in the workplace. In addition, the government continues to monitor both national and international reports of COVID-19, and we will remain current on issues regarding the health and safety of staff within the work environment. Immediate action of deep cleaning and sanitization services have been taking place in instances where certain areas have been compromised. We must continue to be in a position to observe, to react, and to evolve in our response to the point that this is fluid and it is an emergency situation that we are faced with today. Therefore, we must take into account all of the factors involving the life and liberty of these persons. The government of the Bahamas, and I turn now to the financial policy of the government. The government of the Bahamas made a carefully considered policy decision not to lay off any public officer due to the financial challenges of COVID-19. As the public service is the heartbeat of the nation, public officers have also been the heartbeat of the economy through this very difficult time. COVID-19 has expanded the need of the government to provide essential services to its people. and the past several months have been a delicate balancing act between maximizing service delivery and safety. We must also use wisdom. However, in the way that government resources are used, and in the view of the need for stringent fiscal discipline, during this budget year, we have engaged the following policy decisions. Number one, increments, promotions, confirmation, and reclassification of all public officers will be deferred for the 2020-2021 budget year. The establishment or the number of persons employed in each ministry will not increase. New hires will only occur in special circumstances with direct cabinet approval. The Ministry of Public Service, and I turn directly to the Ministry of Public Service. The Ministry of Public Service is tasked with the processing of human resource matters for the public sector. My ministries ensure that public service has firm administration of human resource policies, and that all ministries are adequately staffed, equipped, and operational to meet the increasing demands of delivering quality service. Secondly, the Ministry of the Public Service ensures the career advancement of public officers through continued training, providing functional office accommodations, and also for processing the payment of pensions and gratuities to persons who retire from the public service each year. The Ministry of the Public Service and National Insurance continue to operate remotely and in office with effect from March 2020. Human resource matters were processed and paid along the following items. From March 2020 to June 2020, in our global provisions, $3.114 million was spent. From June 2020 to September 2020, $0 was spent, for a total of $3.114 million in this item. In our global provisions for reclassifications, increments, $1.197 million was spent between March and June. From June through September, $0 was spent, for a total of $1.1 million in that item. Office rent, $10.5 million was spent between March and June. From July to September, approximately $4 million have been spent. In lease agreements, these are the NIB lease agreements, $8 million was spent, and from July to September, $169,000 was spent, for a total of just over $260,000. Corrections, for a total of $8,260,000. Public officers' gratuity for the period from March to June 2020, $9 million was spent, and from July through September, $1.7 million was spent, for a total period of just under $11 million. Pension of officials in the ministry, from March to June, $37 million was spent, and from July through September, $18 million for pension of officials in the government. Insurance premiums between March and June, $16.4 million were spent, and between July and September, $5 million was spent, for a total of $22.329 million, bringing our total expenditure for the month of March to September to over $122 million. Indeed, expenditure to this period was consistent with what is normally expended, except in those areas of promotions, reclassifications, and those areas that I outlined. Training and development is an arm of the Ministry of Public Service and National Insurance, which is known formally as the Public Service Center for Human Resource Development, or PSHARD. COVID-19 required the Director of Training to improve on normal training procedures in order to achieve the department's mandate. PSHARD obtained the Click Meeting software and was able to offer digital webinars for persons in the training division. To us, the response was quite encouraging, as officers were all excited about accessing courses anywhere and on any device. To date, for the period March through August, we have offered 50 training courses, and in total, 2,477 officers have accessed these courses. Indeed, I say that they've been successful in learning from each course that was put on by the Ministry of Public Service. In August, we were privileged to have Dr. Nakia Forbes, consultant physician and director of National HIV/AIDS Infectious Disease Program, to facilitate a webinar on the topic COVID-19 in the workplace for the public service. The webinar was also live streamed via the Ministry of Public Service webpage, Facebook page, and can still be viewed from that site. As we enter this new normal, we will continue to build and refine these new methods of service delivery. And we will continue to ensure that the public service is safe as we strive to deliver quality service to the Bahamian people. I now turn to the National Insurance Board. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to report on the activities of the National Insurance Board, whose mandate includes providing partial income support to citizens and residents in times like these. The last 6 months were extraordinary. Indeed, the National Insurance Board transformed its operations to safely serve its customers and to allow staff to carry out their functions normally. The operations of National Insurance, as such, National Insurance had been able to continue to carry out its mandate to provide the social safety net of partial income replacement during periods of work interruption. During the past 6 months of the pandemic, National Insurance made more than 96,000 transactions of sickness, maternity, injury, funeral, disablement, retirement, invalidity, and survivors' benefits and assistance payments, totaling some $36 million. In the early stages of this pandemic, the monthly pensions payments were paid early to provide much-needed funds in the hands of the beneficiaries and to inject some $68.6 million directly into the economy. Since the beginning of COVID-19, some $90 million have been paid in retirement benefit and grants for old age pensions. These numbers do not include the unemployment payments. Indeed, inclusive of Hurricane Dorian related unemployment benefits, to date, NIB has expended a total of $176 million to Bahamians throughout the length and breadth of these Bahamalands who lost their jobs. The breakdown of this extraordinary amount is as follows. NIB unemployment benefit for Dorian survivors and the government-funded Dorian Extension Program, $12.5 million paid out to over 4,191 claimants. Persons were paid at a rate of 50% of their insurable wage for a total of 26 weeks or 6 months. During the COVID-19 crisis, the government-funded unemployment assistance program for self-employed persons, $15.61 million to just over 7,000 persons were paid. These recipients were paid $200 per week for a period of 12 weeks. Under the government-funded unemployment program extension, which is currently underway, $56.1 million have been paid to over 30,000 persons as of the 11th of October, 2020. This program is still ongoing for persons still unemployed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Persons are now being paid $150 a week for an additional 13 weeks. The ordinary NIB unemployment benefit for contributors to the National Insurance Fund, $91.6 million to 37,000 persons have been paid by NIB. This program itself is ongoing for persons who are eligible for benefits because of their contributions to NIB. Beneficiaries, for example, are paid at a rate of 50% of their insurable wage for up to 13 weeks. You are aware that the government has now extended this program until the end of the year, and persons will be paid up to $100 a week. My fellow Bahamians and members of the media, recognizing the potential impact of COVID-19 on its operations, NIB began its preparation in late February 2020 by developing a COVID-19 business continuity system. This enables staff to work seamlessly from home on their remote days. As part of this plan, staff were redeployed to where the business needed them most, to register claims, to respond to large increase in customer queries, and to adjudicate the unemployment program. In essence, NIB deployed its resources where it was needed most. The customers' interaction with NIB also changed during this pandemic. Customers quickly became acquainted with completing and to using new online portals to make applications for assistance payments under the government's funded assistance program. The use of the employer self-service portal became a more important avenue for employers to submit their contributions and to make payments directly to NIB. NIB has also made some other changes. For the very first time, unemployment benefit were allowed to be paid via direct deposit rather than by check payments only. Secondly, as a safety measure and for the better customer service delivery, NIB moved its check collection process from its headquarters to the Thomas A. Robertson Stadium. NIB clearly recognized that its headquarters was not the best setup and was not the best place that allowed for physical distancing and the other protocols set up by the Ministry of Health. NIB also allowed customers to receive unemployment payments via direct deposit, bank deposits, for the first time to further reduce the need for check collection and to quickly get the much needed funds directly in the hands of the unemployed persons. The far majority of customers opted for this direct method of payment, which is an important innovation for NIB to move to a safer circumstance and a contactless service for its customers. I now wish to recap each of the benefits and assistance in turn. The NIB unemployment benefit. In terms of the regular NIB unemployment benefit program, NIB has, from the 20th of March to the 11th of October this year, processed 37,000 unemployment claims and paid out approximately $91.6 million. Where NIB either one, paid the employees their unemployment benefit through the employer under a memorandum of understanding between NIB and the agency, or alternatively, working with the employer, which processed the payment for their furloughed staff directly as company batches through an expedited method. Approximately 13,000 claims were processed, in addition to the normal process by the V3 system, and 3,000 of these claims were paid via a special check run. NIB did not go without challenges. I wish to highlight some of the challenges that NIB had when, with the claims process, which affected the range of benefits that NIB offers, and in particular, the sickness and unemployment benefits that rely on more recent contribution records of determining the eligibility of the claimant. Firstly, as most of you are aware, compliance with the method of payment of contribution has always been a challenge for NIB. Companies, for a variety of reasons, have been in arrears with NIB. The need for compliance became even more clear once their employees began to apply for unemployment benefits, submitted and posted to employees' account. In instances where records were missing, companies were generally very helpful when inspectors reached out to them for the necessary information. This did, however, affect the speed at which NIB was able to adjudicate its claims, thus causing some delays in making payments to unemployed persons. In April of this year, after the start of the crisis, and recognizing the possible delays caused by this backlog, the Cabinet of the Bahamas approved a recommendation from NIB that allowed NIB to pay claims where the employer had recently submitted the necessary C-10 application form for the records of the NIB, even if the C-10 information was not yet formally posted. This allowed for thousands of applications that were trapped in the system to be processed and to be paid quickly. NIB then only had to focus on where the company had not filed the contributions records to its office. The pandemic has caused each beneficiary of this ever-important Social Security program to understand the importance of paying their contributions and to ensuring that both the records and payments are submitted to NIB. Delays in paying out benefits, particularly the unemployment benefit, have had negative consequences. It is my belief now that every Bahamian and Bahamians everywhere now better understand their rights, their benefits, and how the NIB claims process works, given their experience during this pandemic. Secondly, NIB also found that many of its UEB claims were being suspended because claimants were not verifying their continued employment, or because contributions continued to be paid on their behalf past their last day of work. As required by law, unemployment benefit recipients are required to visit in person to the Department of Labor. In the initial stages of the unemployment benefit program, the Bahamas was in a lockdown, and so these verifications could not be done safely in person. As a result of this, new mechanisms were set up, which allowed email verification of continued unemployment, and the Department of Labor created a website which allowed for verification. NIB found that notwithstanding public announcements, claimants were not verifying their continued unemployment, and so claims were not processed in the V3 system. NIB V3 system also suspended thousands of claims where it found contributions in the system past the reported last day of work. NIB IT and Customer Care Service Department has worked diligently to address this so that legitimate claims could be paid correctly. Ladies and gentlemen, it remains extremely important for all of us to inform NIB when you or your staff have returned to work. We have to ensure that NIB pays out of its financial resources only to those persons who are eligible for partial income replacement, and not to those who are gainfully employed. However, notifying NIB of the return to work of employees will go a long way in preventing such overpayments from occurring. I now turn to the Government Unemployment Assistance Program. The first of the government-funded unemployment assistance program for a self-employed person have now generally concluded. This program initially provided assistance for jet ski operators, hair braiders, barbers, and all of the persons in this category in the touristic trade for the most part. NIB quickly ascertained that there were 9,381 unique applications. Of these, approximately 7,000 235 were approved and paid. Some $15.6 million was disbursed, with the far majority going to bank accounts. About 2,200 were denied, mainly due to the lack of the required information by the claimant, including the information that they did not have, including a business license, for example, in the case of those persons who are in the touristic field. As I have previously explained, with respect to the initial government unemployment assistance program for self-employed persons, for those who are unbanked or who are provided incorrect banking information, NIB had to establish a partnership with SunCash Limited, a digital payment provider. And under this program, the vast majority of people received their payments through SunCash, and a significant other amount of individuals received their payments via direct deposit. And NIB, in addition to this, issued a small number of checks to the Family Islands. The Government Unemployment Extension Program. On July 1st, 2020, the government introduced the government-funded unemployment extension program, recognizing that the economy would need more time to get back on track. As such, the government offered an assistance program administered by NIB for up to 13 weeks. Persons were paid $30 per day or $150 a week in this program. This program came about as a result of a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce and the Employers Confederation and the Retailers Association. They wanted to be sure that the system was flexible enough to allow for claimants who would be working for part of the week to receive partial payments. These payments would be prorated or have been prorated. The verification process confirms how many days the person was not working for each pay period, and then the prorated payments, taking those days into account, was made through to these clients. Through consultation with the business community, NIB recognized that employers were bringing staff back on rotation. I'm grateful for the input of these business communities into the design of this program. The Government Unemployment Extension Program, which is currently underway, covers the following category of persons or workers. Those who have completed 13 weeks of regular unemployment assistance benefits, and they became unemployed during this period. Approximately 22,000 persons are involved in this group. Those who had concluded the Dorian Extension Program, which is just under 1,000 persons. Those who had concluded the Government Unemployment Assistance Program for self-employed persons in certain sectors, which is approximately 3,000 persons. And young people under the age of 35 who are disallowed under the regular unemployment assistance benefit, but had worked for at least 3 months. And in this case, there are approximately 1,000 persons. To date, the board have paid just under $56.1 million to 30,000 of these claimants. For this group, NIB also introduced a digital payment plan rather than its over-reliance on check payments. To date, The majority of the payments have been made by a memorandum of understanding from the employer to the NIB recipients, and $20.8 million have been paid through that process. Direct deposit to bank accounts, $19.6 million have been paid. The digital payment providers, $13.4 million. And the check payments, $2.3 million. These funds are to be reimbursed to NIB by the government of the Bahamas. And I understand, Director, that the Ministry of Finance is well on its way in providing you with that money. Let's look at the way forward for NIB. NIB continues to work towards its return to normalcy, the pace of which is development of the COVID-19 crisis and recovery remain in place. NIB's main priority has always been the carrying out of its mandate, which by ensuring a safe environment for its staff and customers, and that persons who need the monies and who qualify for the funds can get it directly. One special technology that NIB has relaunched earlier and is now fully developed is the ESS, or the Employer Self-Service Portal. Since March 2020, the emergency orders, and when the emergency orders took effect, several hundred additional employees have registered for the ESS, or the Employer Self-Service Portal. They've registered online for this portal. And after some additional tweaking, the portal is properly up and running. COVID-19 has created an urgency for NIB to accelerate its plans to deploy more user-friendly innovations, technologies, and methodologies to make interacting with NIB easier and to facilitate improvements in customer service delivery. Customers would have had a foretaste of what is to come, and through the shared experience by both customers and NIB, the board better now understands how it works, what is needed, and how best to adjust some of its projects ahead to modernize its operation. Customers can look forward to improved responses from NIB. Customers can also look forward to improved relationship because of the new telephone and customer care center that has been implemented. And once more user-friendly online portals are in place, this will benefit the applications and improve our communications platform. Ladies and gentlemen, the success of the NIB and the NIB board, and in particular its success to its COVID-19 response, has come because of a team effort. Staff members from across the board have been pulled to work in various areas. Staff in all of the family islands are processing claims and posting contribution to respond to the volume of claims received at one time. The amount of claims that we see today has never before been seen in our history. And I want to commend every single staff member of the National Insurance Board for its hard work, its dedication, and the fact that they too have made an eternal sacrifice to their families and their job space. I wish to conclude my report by assuring the Bahamian people and the people of this nation that this ministry is working and will continue to work on your behalf. We are a nation at war with an invisible enemy, but we are also a proud nation of overcomers. Now is the time to embrace the changes as we enter this new normal. Our hope is that this pandemic has created an opportunity to modernize and transform the public sector, to build our technical capacity, and to meet the needs of the 21st century. As we pay homage to all of the essential workers and all of the government agencies who have continued to work countless hours to ensure, cooperate with us, to be patient, to work with us, to work together, to safely reopen our economy. Thank you for playing your part and continue to follow the guidelines and regulations given by the healthcare professionals. We will survive this COVID-19 pandemic, and we will return bigger and better than ever. By God's grace, in the words of an old Negro spiritual, we say all, down in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Thank you so much.
Faced with a national crisis, you fight on our behalf. Masked heroes, standing for us, standing with us. Our lab technicians, providing timely test results. Our police and defense force, maintaining law and order. Our social service workers, providing needed support. Our sanitation workers, ensuring clean environments. Our customs and immigration officers, controlling and protecting our borders. Our EMTs, nurses, and doctors providing quality medical care. To our National Insurance Agency, bridging the financial gap. To the teachers, ensuring that learning never stops. To the utility providers, keeping our power and water on. To those public servants, providing vital administrative support from work and home. To the members of Parliament, cabinet ministers, and our Prime Minister, providing leadership in unprecedented times. To the media, keeping us informed. To all other public servants on the front lines, and to all heroes providing essential, exceptional service, we say thank you.
Minister, Permanent Secretary, Chairman, good evening, Bahamas. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to present these brief remarks on behalf of the National Insurance Board. I will be very brief given the Minister's very comprehensive report. Before I begin, let me echo the Minister's comments in thanking the staff and management and the executive team of the National Insurance Board for the job done during this pandemic. It has truly been an extraordinary experience. In terms of the work of the National Insurance Board, it is important to set it in context. In 2019, the board of the National Insurance Board adopted a set of strategic goals to guide the direction of the organization. The strategic plan, 2019 to 2023, sets out 4 main goals. They deal around who we serve, the people, providing that exceptional customer service. Looking at our people, our staff, making sure that we develop and retain talented and motivated employees. Ensuring that our fund is strong and there for generations to come, and ensuring that we govern ourselves appropriately. Now, this pandemic really drew on numbers 1 and 3 of our strategic plan, focusing on providing needs as they come due. As was mentioned, the board entered a phase of planning very early in the process in late February. And we set about putting in place a business continuity plan to guide our actions. In terms of what we did, we realized that this was an unprecedented challenge with the scope of unemployment beyond anything perhaps Bahamas had ever seen. Social security systems were not meant to deal with this type of collapse that was due to a pandemic. We're used to dealing with normal cyclical unemployment. And so we initiated the process, as was mentioned, to batch pay our employees through their employers. We started with the big hotels. We were approached by other associations and gradually extended this to all large and then medium, and then small businesses. To date, 180 companies have participated in the expedited UEB process, and we have been working with 30 memorandum of understanding with various companies. I wanted to give a brief update on the current operations of the National Insurance Board. We remain in our red phase, Tier 2. Registration for individuals, that's your smart card services. We have reduced services here. We focus on first-time registrants, students, and loss and replacement cards. Stakeholders have been advised that the NIB numbers on cards, even if they are expired, remain valid. In terms of verifications, we are open via email. We are not providing face-to-face service at this time. Please feel free to send in your forms via email. In terms of our compliance services, we highly discourage face-to-face C10 preparation by our inspectors, but our inspectors are available via phone and email. Letters of good standing, operations remain open via email. In terms of contribution payments, we are stressing that payments can be made via bank and wire transfer, the ESS portal as was mentioned, and payments at headquarters. In terms of claims and benefit applications, we are preferring email submissions of those claims. However, drop boxes are provided at all of our locations. And our queries, we prefer email and phone queries. No in-person services and the National Insurance Fund has been built up over generations. Our total investments stand at $1.5 billion. Our reserves, which encompass that, start at $1.7 billion. We have expended just over $300 million last year, and that's a typical year for us. And so we know that that will expand tremendously this year. And our contribution income is generally around $290 million. And given the pandemic and the loss of employment, we know that this will be down, hovering around 70% or so of our budgeted amount. As was mentioned, indeed we had higher than normal payments, which commenced really in September of 2019 with the Dorian payment of unemployment benefits. Dorian usual UEB payments were about $8.61 million. There was then the Dorian extension payments of around $3.85 million. Our government unemployment assistance program, which provided income support for self-employed people, were $15.6 million. Government extension of the UEB program, $56 million, and NIB normal of technology adoption. And we're going to be pushing over the next few months in terms of online claim submission directly into our databases, and also claims tracker solutions, so that you as the customer can manage and see your applications. NIB is also modernizing the way that employers make their contributions and submit their C10s to speed up our posting times. As was mentioned, we have available right now the ESS portal system. We are also working on developing a C10 easy application for employers with 1 to 5 employees. We have right now as well the MS Excel contribution statement, the C10 statement, which will become the standard for us. And we hope to cease our paper C10 forms at a set date in the future. NIB will be modern direct deposits to bank accounts or credit union accounts, and also looking at digital wallet payments as the norm as well. I want to thank you all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Again, I want to open for questions. ZNS, Keisha Adley, your question, please.
Yes, good afternoon.
No.
My first question has to do with Minister Roll's very clear declaration about, I guess, a public service freeze on hiring, a pause on increments and other benefits for now. There were, however, some stories swirling this week about the possibility or difficulty, certainly, in making salary payments at some more vulnerable corporations like Bahamas Air, for example, which took a direct hit, so to speak, from COVID-19. What assurances can the minister give on the continuity of timely and full salary payments, especially in those vulnerable areas.
Minister?
Thank you so much for that question. I speak for the Ministry of Public Service, not the corporations. What I can say, though, is that for the last 6 months, just over 6 months, the government has been consistent and no corporation and no member of the public service have lost salary. With regards to Bahamas Air, and I don't speak for Bahamas Air, what I can say to you is that we are in discussions with the minister responsible, that has responsibility for Bahamas Air, and the government will make every effort to ensure that a reasonable and an acceptable position is taken. But we have taken the position that workers can't just stay home and continue to be paid for the rest of the year. And so opportunities may come for workers at Bahamas Air so that they cannot lose salary or income for this period.
Thank you. My second question, I guess this is the minister as well, and I'm sure this is one that you've gotten frequently, but I'm wondering how aggressively national insurance may be looking at going after employers. Of course, this whole situation has shone a spotlight on where there may be delinquencies among employers in paying those benefits. How aggressively may you go after them? And of course, considering and taking into account the Balancing Act, as businesses have also suffered losses and will have to claw their way back.
Thank you. The director will take that question. Director?
Thank you. We have made compliance and going after delinquent employers a very high priority at the board. We have developed new tools which allows management now to understand and to see those customers which are delinquent, and to be able to almost set up pro forma billings of those for those customers. We have retooled our inspectorate department to really focus during this period where they're not doing on-site inspections on delinquencies. And so this is a very important aspect. I think with the pandemic and the effect on paying benefits, every Bahamian has seen now how important really compliance with the NIB contributions really is. And we've had good support when our inspectors have reached out to delinquent employers in terms of bringing their accounts back in order. But that will be a very high priority for us. Thank you.
Just to add what the director said, I want, and I'm sure you know, all employers know that it is wrong to deduct monies from individuals and not make those payments to the National Insurance Board. And we're going to set up, as the director said, technologies to be able to see what is happening. And once we get to a point where employees can see whether the deposits are made on their behalf, I think we will be in a better space. National insurance, and to know that it's your moral obligation and your financial business to make sure funds that you collect from employees are given to the board.
Thank you, Keishla Adley. We now invite Kyle Joaquin, on news.
Hi, thank you. This question is for the minister. The $100 a week, for how long can government sustain this if the situation were to go beyond December? And where would we go from there? Is this a last resort just to offer some families something? Because many are speaking out saying it's kind of insufficient.
Minister?
The position of the government is that it wants to provide income for individuals. We realize that it is not perhaps what individuals have been accustomed to or what they have been making. But you got to also take in the context that we have been doing this now for 6 months, and that we've been making payments to individuals for this period. And we must be assured that basically we started at $200 a week. It was reduced to $150, and now it's to $100. We want to make sure that individuals have at least the ability to provide some assistance. The government has the ability to provide some assistance. We don't see ourselves as the instrument where we may be able to provide the Rolls Royce. We're now down to the Toyota, and we will move, and when it goes to December, it'll be approximately 9 months of providing continuous assistance to individuals. I hear the frustration out there as well from some individuals, and I say, we hear your cry, we know it's tough, but we too are taking the position that we must do some things, and one of the things we're doing is providing some form of income support for families that may be out of work.
Thank you, Minister. One more question, Kyle Joaquin.
While the minister's there, you could just come back one time, I guess. You've mentioned that there are some receiving unemployment assistance who don't inform NIB of their return to work. Now, are you suggesting that there are people who are double dipping? If so, can you say how many instances and what is done by NIB in that regard? Can any legal action be taken?
Let me start by saying I can't tell you specifically that this process is going on. What I did say, though, and what the director was seeking to say, is that our audit department is monitoring this just in case it happened. And if by chance it has happened, then in the first instance, I would advise those persons and those companies to return the funds directly to NIB, because we will find out. And secondly, we certainly are not encouraging that in directive. You may wish to make one comment on that as well.
Thank you, Minister. As was mentioned, we have an audit team who are going through meticulously all of the unemployment payments to date. And as they go through anything that looks amiss, they do go through, they call and check on the payments to make sure all is well. And so we look at both overpayments, underpayments as well, and where there is fraud, we do address it in other ways as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle Joaquin. We invite Matthew Moxie from Eyewitness News.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There have still been taxpayers complaining about receiving payments, especially through Island Pay. Can the minister clarify what was the reason for choosing Island Pay as a third party to, I guess, disperse these funds? Why not pay directly to persons' bank accounts? And also, was a tender ever released to the public for other platforms to be able to vie in this process of winning this bid?
Let me begin by saying that this is the one beef that I've had with members of the media who went out to the sports center one day. Let's give them 2 days. Took a picture of the long lines and continues to say the lines exist that's almost wrapping around Nassau. And every Tuesday when I pass the media, I say to them, go down to the sports center at 11 o'clock any day, take a photo of the line and reprint for the public so that they would know that there's absolutely no line for them to receive their funds at the sports center. But we continue to publish that and we continue to say, oh, there are long lines at NIB. But be that as it may, you're in the journalism business and you get to make some money. But I expect that you would give the full news. Secondly, Island Pay, like SunCash, is a digital wallet. It's owned by Bahamians and operated by Bahamians. We saw this as an opportunity for Bahamians to assist us in getting funds to our customers. Yes, there may have been some difficulties initially with individuals because they had to download an app and do some things to get their funds. But I visited the sports center. I at least visit the sports center once a week where one of their kiosks exists. And I don't hear any complaints. I know there's been a lot of focused attention on Island Pay. I know, but no one from the media has said to me, well, we did the same thing with SunCash, or that every person had an opportunity to apply in December of last year, before the pandemic, to offer the service to NIB. Every single one. And we offered the service when we knew that we could not deliver funds to persons as the one space, so that there were many opportunities elsewhere. Secondly, if you listen to my presentation, I think it's just over $2 million have gone to these digital wallets. But the majority of funds that are dispersed by NIB are dispersed directly to the bank accounts of these individuals. But, you know, I say you're in that business, and we're in this business, and we want to make sure that the Bahamians get the best possible service. They have an opportunity to use, and we had an opportunity to use 2 of our digital wallets. We've gone to them to assist us, and we will continue to explore ways to ensure that the needed monies get to the Bahamian public as quickly as they can. And again, like I said, every single digital wallet provider had an opportunity to come to NIB. We said to them in December of last year, long before COVID, that we were interested in their service, and some of them that did not apply are now screaming, but you know, that's why I'm in politics, and that's my business. My business is to make those decisions to ensure that the Bahamian people get the best possible service.
Thank you, Mr. Moxie. You have one more question for us, please.
Yes, and just piggying off of Kyle's question, I know that there were previous reports of alleged fraud at NIB as well. Just want to get an update on those prior investigations, and has NIB still been having problems with NIB fraud?
Well, we can't update you on the cases because those matters have gone before the police, the ones that have come to us. The director could talk about potential fraud at NIB, but we're not in a position to comment about matters that are before the courts. And so, Director, if you want to just reiterate what we're doing to ensure that fraud does not take place in NIB.
Thank you. And again, to reiterate the minister's comments, it's our policy not to comment on cases before the courts. What we have been doing, as I mentioned before, is really having thorough audits of all of our payments to make sure that all is in order there. Those audits continue. We know that the volume is enormous in terms of the number of payments we've made this year. And so the audits will continue in order to ensure that there have been proper payments by everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moxie. I now invite Karen Bain from Global FM Freeport.
A very pleasant good afternoon. We've received numerous complaints regarding persons who have applied for pension, and in one particular case, over 9 months has passed and the applicant has not received payment, even though they've supplied all of the required documents as requested by an NIB officer. Their pension is something that they have worked for, and at this particular time, they are especially in need of. My question is, what is the challenge and why the long wait in pensioners receiving their pension payment?
Thank you for your question. I invite the director to respond.
Thank you. Our pension payments process, the claims process, is one that we are always endeavoring to improve. At the moment, our processing time is between 3 to 6 months. The majority of that time is spent in ensuring that persons are paid the correct pension amount. We do a very deep search in terms of the employment history of the claimant to make sure that we have received all of the contributions over the lifetime, because of course the pension amount, the monthly amount, is calculated based on the pension, the contributions. And so you want to ensure that the customer has the best possible rate to be paid each month. And so there is quite a bit of checking and review done to ensure that their previous employers, particularly if there are many employers, have submitted everything that needs to happen. And so it goes back to compliance, and also posting of those contributions to make sure that we have good calculations so that we can pay the best possible rate to our customers. And so we are, as I said, always seeking to improve in terms of the time frames. It's an area that I monitor very closely. We have seen some improvement, and we seek to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. May we have your second question, please?
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. Healthcare workers are being stretched in New Providence due to the spike in COVID-19 cases. Has the government approved the hiring of additional doctors and nurses to assist the current healthcare staff? And what is the budgeted amount allocated for the hiring of this new staff, if you are?
Thank you. I invite the minister to respond.
Thank you. That's a very good question. The government has been in, as a cabinet, we have been in discussions with the Ministry of Health, the Minister of Health. We understand the burden that the existing COVID-19 has placed on healthcare workers. And again, we have to make sure, as we have been doing, that we've exhausted all of the potential healthcare workers in the Bahamas first before we start recruiting elsewhere. And that's what we have been doing, identifying persons who have worked in UB. We've looked at some retired persons as well to bring them back. And the Minister of Health is, and he'll speak to this more, he is committed to ensuring to beef up our numbers, and if needs be, to bring in workers from abroad to assist us with this exercise. But there again, like I said, there must be a clear understanding that we have firstly found all the Bahamians possible who qualified to make sure that they are engaged before we look to recruit outside of the Bahamas.
Thank you for your questions. I now invite Tyler Simonet from JCN.
Yes, good afternoon to the ministry and to all who are listening. My first question is, with the unemployment plan having to be extended and the amount for the benefit dropping for the second time, are there any fears that NIB will not remain solvent if the program is to be extended after December? And how far away is NIB from that possibility?
Minister?
As long as you make your contributions, NIB will be totally solvent. So we ask you and the entire working population in the Bahamas to continue to make your contributions to NIB. You know we have been stretched. I indicated a number today when the director provided me with how much monies that we have spent, and basically NIB itself is nearing $100 million, and the government is nearing $100 million. And so this pandemic, in terms of the monetary cost to the government, we see it as going well over $200 million. And so my only word to you is to get the message out, to encourage every single worker to contribute to NIB, to make sure that employers pay the benefits directly to NIB, then we would have no worry as to whether or not we're going to go under. But these are tough times. Unemployment is high. And so, yes, we are stretched. But I did say at the very end that we are a strong and resilient people, that we will overcome, that we will do our best. And the government's duty and obligation is to its people. And so, as we started with 200, we're down to 100, and that hopefully will take us to December. We are very hopeful that we we'll have some controls before that the economy will be open, and that we will be in a better space. And we will make an evaluation of where we are at some point in November. But for now, we say that we are able and we have the capacity to do what we're doing. And we just urge Bahamians to bear with us, and those who are working to make their contributions directly to NIB every single week of the year, and we will be in a better space.
Thank you. We have one more question. Tyler?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that response, Minister Rule. My second question is, in early August, it was mentioned that thousands of NIB checks remain uncollected. As of right now, is that still a problem? Were those checks ever collected? And does NIB still have a buildup of uncollected checks?
I invite.
I'd like to just advise that at the moment, we still have approximately 2,500 checks for collection at the stadium. And I'd just also like to reiterate what the minister would have said as far as the lines are concerned. At present, the lines are non-existent. And so please come, collect your checks from the stadium, Mondays through Fridays, 9 to 4. We stand ready, willing, and able to serve you. So please, collect your checks from the stadium. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. We appreciate your question. I now invite RTV, Notario McKinsey.
Good day. It's Eyewitness Digital. First question for the minister. I was just wondering if there was a dollar value on the deferrals of increments, et cetera. Is there a value on what that represents for the government in terms of its expenditure, or what it would have expended?
In response to your question, yes, the government has a dollar value in regard to increments and confirmations. It's going to add up to millions of dollars in regard to the savings on that regard. But keep in mind that we said a deferment, which means that the increments will be paid, the promotions will be dealt with, and we're looking at the next budget year for that to take place. So it's a deferment with the hope that once the economy opens up, the funding will be available for us to proceed. Next question, please.
Thank you. My second question was for Dr. Virgil Roll. Just was wondering, and I guess this may have been touched on before, but just in terms of how the pandemic has done to the overall economy. I know it was mentioned that contributions are expected to be down significantly, et cetera.
Director?
Thank you. Now, the fund has expended from its own resources, that will be permanently from its own resources, about $91 million. And then also we had extraordinary payments as a result of Dorian. Now remember, as I mentioned, the fund is a 1.7 billion in reserve. And we carefully manage those reserves to ensure that we have short-term assets available and very liquid for us to be able to use. We have medium-term assets for the future, and we have long-term assets as well that are available for us. And so we carefully manage our liquidity to ensure that there is sufficient to meet our needs. We have, in addition, obviously, to unemployment, our core duty, which is retirement and pension payments, which range every month around $20 to $24 million per month. And of course, we have other claims and benefits that we pay as well. And so we take all of that into account through our investments department in order to ensure that we have matching funding each month for any liabilities and claims that we have due. We have ongoing now our actuarial review, which is mandated by law every 5 years. And that also helps us to ensure that the fund is in a good place. We have our previous actuarial reports online, and that at the conclusion of that actuarial review, a number of recommendations will come in order to ensure that we are in a very good place for the future with the fund. But at the moment, the fund stands at.
Thank you. We appreciate your questions. I now invite Leandra Roll from the Tribune.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I know earlier this year there were talks about NIB contribution rates increasing to cover NIB deficits as well as to ensure the sustainability of the National Insurance Fund, what the director just spoke about. But obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic placing a major strain on NIB resources, this has sparked discussions about the possibility of that happening. Can an official perhaps speak to the likelihood of that happening in the near future, if possible?
Minister?
I would be delighted if the Tribune would lead that message to the public, or members of the media would lead that message to the public. What obviously what they have heard is the need for that to take place, and hearing that need, perhaps it would be a good thing for them to take the lead in this subject. And I await the editorial notes from all of the members of the media and give us some guidance as to what direction we should take.
Thank you. May I have your next question, please?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to know for my final question, how much money has been spent by the ministry on COVID-19 prevention initiatives like purchasing PPE kits, et cetera?
We purchase kits in regard to, the employers required by the Act to provide a safe and healthy environment. So that's been our mandate from the government. Funds have been spent on ensuring that the areas are sanitized for each ministry. And that's how it's been dealt with. It's not just one ministry that's responsible for the whole public service. So each ministry was required to purchase the relevant safety kits for the ministry. Within the Ministry of Public Service, we were also responsible for providing the masks throughout the public sector. And that in itself would have cost us about $500,000 to date. But we're continuing to provide at least 2 per person throughout the public sector. That's the goal. The director, do you want to speak to that as well for NIB? Okay. Yes.
Certainly for NIB in terms of PPE, plexiglass, and sanitizations, we spent about $140,000. And we've also had to purchase a number of laptop computers, which is added to the cost.
I'll invite Christina from RTV.
Good evening, Christina Dragovich, RTV. Given the strain on NIB resources coupled with reduced contributions, will there be any changes for pensioners or those receiving disability benefits? Any anticipated changes?
Director?
Thank you. NIB has a mandate which is governed by law, and so we are prepared to meet that mandate. As I mentioned, we carefully manage our funding in order to meet that mandate. All of our benefits are actuarial. Have been paying now the biennial increase, which happened in July or early July. So there'll be actually a slightly higher benefit payment to retirement and other payments as well as a result of the biennial increase, which happens every 2 years, where the benefits are assessed to ensure that they keep up with inflation. Thank you.
I also want to reiterate the wonderful policy position taken by NIB to advance pensions to pensioners so that funds could be available to Bahamians everywhere. This was a very, very good effort by NIB to make sure monies got in the hands of individuals during a time when thousands of persons became unemployed or were furloughed. And so I want to commend you, Director, for making sure that pensions were paid early, that individuals throughout the Bahamas got funds to keep them operational and to keep their families together. And that was but one of the programs that was initiated by NIB. So thank you, Director.
Thank you. Okay, we invite you to ask your second question. I apologize.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you so much. We now want to invite Jasper Ward from the Nassau Guardian. Jasper? That's it? Okay. Thank you all very much. I just want to wish you good evening and also to encourage you to follow the health protocols. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.